I got to tell you, it feels good to just be in a room full of people for a change, doesn't it? And I was thinking as we're getting ready for this, it just a room full of people that do workforce like we do is a special room to be in, right? And I was thinking how when people get knocked down and they need help in our region, the people in this room and your teams, that's the people that reach out their hand and they get a helping hand and we lift people up. And I just want to say, just being together with you and being part of this is just a joy for me. And today, we're here to lift you up. So all of you who are attending with us today, thank you for being here. And this is not about us twisting your arm to do something for us. We're here to say we've done a bunch of work. Through COVID, we got a bunch of work done. Some exciting things got done. And we want to give it to you today. So I want to quickly, though, go back and talk a little bit about our launch. Everything that I wanted to say is already on these sheets, and I know you can all read, so I'm just going to let you look at those at the appropriate time. What I want to do is go back to our launch meeting. Some of you were at our launch meeting. It was June 2 years ago, so a little over 2 years ago. And a couple of key things were shared at that launch meeting. First was TalNet was started with the idea of good to great. We were really clear that at the beginning, there was nothing in West Michigan that's broken that needed to be fixed. We were at a place when we started that we have outstanding organizations doing outstanding work. And because of that, we could take our workforce system to the next level. That we had an extraordinary opportunity because of all the great organizations and leaders we have. And then we shared a business analogy. So when we were looking for business models, we ended up landing on where is there a business model where there's a whole bunch of autonomous organizations that give seamless service to their customers. And we talked about the global aviation industry, right? Because in global aviation, every airport is autonomous. Every country has autonomous airspace. Every down to the plane level, the pilot is in control, right? It's a global industry that has incredible autonomy at every point. Yet, you can buy a ticket and fly from anywhere in the world to anywhere else in the world, and you and your baggage gets there most of the time, right? It's pretty good service. And even if there's a service lapse, the service recovery is amazing. You can be in the middle of somewhere else in the world, and your bags show up a day or two later. So when we looked at that, we said, well, wouldn't it be nice if we could do that for students and job seekers, right? If you compare the airline industry, which we all like to gripe about, right? But if you compare them to us in workforce and education, we have room to improve, right? So that was the vision of this good to great. And then we said, how do we do it? And when we looked at the airline industry, we found they agreed on some common processes. Well, one of the key things you got to do if you want to run, efficient air system is turn planes around, right? Because when those assets are sitting on the ground, it's a waste of money. And if you look, you can go anywhere in the world, and there's a team of gate agents, and they organize everybody. There's a cleaning team that does their thing real quick on the plane. There's a maintenance team that does their thing. There's the baggage team does their thing. There's the catering team does their thing. Everybody knows their roles. They do it, and all these different autonomous organizations have these common processes that they do, and that's why they have a seamless service to their customers. So that was the dream, right? So what we're here to share with you is we've made some progress on that dream. And what we did is we decided you can't do everything in workforce. So we picked 5 things that we could work together on, knowing that there's a whole bunch of other important stuff, right? Like, transfer agreements between schools. We didn't attack that, but that's really, really important, right? And then as we got closer to this event, we paused, and John here is my partner and actually the lead on this project. We connected with Amanda Cage at the National Fund for Workforce Solutions. And National Fund is an incredible network. They have 35 sites where they have funding collaboratives with multiple foundations and community partners, and they're doing some of the most innovative work in America. So we wanted to benchmark against them. Because, we can just sit around and pat each other on the back like we're doing great work, but you want to find out, how do we measure up against the people who are really doing the best work in the country? And we compared the models, and John's going to go through some of that. And one of the areas that we did not address that is really an emerging important issue is the idea of good jobs. So Amanda is going to share a lot about that with us today. So right now I want to introduce Amanda, and after Amanda, John will pick it up and facilitate the panel. Amanda Cage joined the National Fund for Workforce as president and CEO. Actually, I noticed right at the beginning of the pandemic, March of 2020. So can you imagine? You take over the month the nation goes in hiding. Amanda has an amazing history in workforce on many different jobs with funders and with collaborators in the Chicago area. So I am going to turn this over now to Amanda, and thank you very much, Amanda, for helping us out today.
Great. Well, thank you. I couldn't hear what Bill had to say about me, so I hope that he had good things to say. I'm Amanda Cage, and I'm happy to be with you all in Michigan this morning. Laura, can you go ahead and pull up the slides? So I just want to, and you can go to the first slide. Again, I didn't hear Bill's intro, so I'm going to just tell you that I spent a little bit about who I am and the work that we do at the National Fund. But just as way of background, so you know, I've spent a lot of time thinking about the labor market in different ways. I come to this role with a decade of work in the public workforce system. I spent 5 years in philanthropy, managing a workforce development portfolio, started my career as a union organizer. So just have been thinking about workers and employers and the economy for a long time. And I will tell you, we are in a very unique moment. So as Bill probably told you, I'm the CEO of the National Fund for Workforce Solutions. We are a national network of change makers really thinking about innovation within the workforce development field. And we do that working with a number of core partners. We work with philanthropy, employers, workforce boards, community colleges, community-based organizations, and of course, workers. And if you can see from this map where we operate, we're in 30 communities all around the country. Next slide. And we do our work through what we consider to be 4 solutions that we think are critical to building an inclusive economy for everyone. And I hope that, go back. There you go. I hope some of this resonates with you all in the room as you think about the work you do. So first, we activate employers to make jobs better. At the National Fund, we were really at the forefront of talking about job quality years and years and years ago, and really believing that employers have a role and a responsibility around thinking about how they design their jobs to fit and support the workers who work there. And so hopefully a little bit what I'll talk about at the end of my presentation today is really about that activate employers role. How can we work with employers to make jobs better? We also equip workers for success, and that really is about workforce development in the way that we all sort of traditionally think about it. So, on the job training, incumbent worker training, apprenticeship. What we bring to that conversation is talking about worker voice and worker support. What are the things that workers need to be able to be successful in those programs? We believe in changing systems for improved outcomes. So we all know that workforce development is a complex ecosystem of lots of different players. And we believe that there's ways that those institutions can play better together. And also, as we've seen, really remove some of the barriers that get in the way of both employer and worker success. And we do all of this, but through co-investment. So in the 30 communities where we have collaboratives, people have come together to decide either to pool or align their funding or bring other time and talents to the conversation, but with a shared vision of what workforce development should look like in their community. Next slide. I talked a little bit about this being a really unique moment. When Bill first came to me to ask me to talk to this group this summer, I had a totally different presentation prepared because things have changed. We're in this very unique moment where things are changing really month to month as we are pulling out of what has been the last 18 months. So I wanted to start just with a little bit of a timeline. Because we started our job quality work at the National Fund, as I mentioned, years ago. But prior to the pandemic, we had a lot of interest in job quality. And part of that was because of what was happening in the labor market in January of 2020, which now seems decades ago, but really wasn't that long ago. In January 2020, we had a booming economy. We had the tightest labor market many of us had ever seen. The national unemployment rate was 3.6%. I remember being in Boston at that time, and their unemployment rate was 1.9%. And I thought to myself, we didn't think unemployment could get that low. We had employers who could not fill open positions. And business growth was really being limited by these workforce challenges. And so there was a lot of interest in employers in figuring out how they could recruit and retain workers. Next slide. What else was true in January 2020, which we don't talk very much about. We like to talk about sort of the roaring dynamics of what was happening in 2019 and in early 2020, was that over 70% of the jobs in many communities paid less than $53,000 a year, and many had no benefits, including paid sick leave, which of course we would all find out later on how important that was. 59% of workers said that personal finances were the greatest source of their stress. And 40% of Americans could not come up with $400 to handle an emergency expense, like a car repair or a medical emergency. Next slide. And then we had the Great Disruption, right? This triple crisis. Millions of people infected with COVID. At this point, over 724,000 Americans have died, disproportionately affecting people of color. We experienced mandatory stay-at-home orders and business closures. We had tens of millions of people filing unemployment claims, including people who never, ever envisioned or thought they would be dealing with unemployment personally or dealing with an unemployment system. And then, of course, George Floyd's murder sparks nationwide protests, creating the new civil rights movement. And what's unique about this time period, what happened in 2020, is that we all experienced it together, right? As a nation, everybody experienced all of this at once. So we've learned a lot from the pandemic. We learned that job quality is a racial equity issue. So we have been talking about job quality for a long time, but we learned through regular reports that we all sort of watched in terms of how the pandemic affected people's jobs, that there were more people of color in what we would consider low quality jobs. And in this case, low quality jobs that exposed them to the virus. We learned that our economy was built on this shaky foundation, that we had far too many of these low-wage jobs that we considered to be essential. And we literally considered them to be essential, right? We came up, states across the country, governors, mayors had to deem what they considered to be essential jobs. We know in this moment that the trauma of COVID is creating what has been termed the Great Resignation. And it makes us believe that the economy can only truly be strong when it's rooted in the well-being of all. So next slide. So we're really making a call to action, saying that we need to redesign our economy to be well-rooted in the well-being of all by creating good jobs with a very specific focus on racial equity. So we want to start with employers, and I am assuming that there are employers that look like this in the room that you're sitting in the community which you operate, who have these organizational values and missions. And what we really want to do is help those employers match their organizational decisions and, more importantly, their operational practices to these values and missions, and truly get them to invest and support their workers. And we know the way to do this is to collect and review both internal and external data by looking at who you're hiring, how you're hiring, what does your retention look like? Are people advancing in your organization? And what's really important as we're asking these questions is just aggregating this information by race and gender, because we know that different workers experience workplaces differently. And it's really important to include worker input in these conversations. So when you talk about good jobs, the first question everybody asks you is, well, what is a good job, right? And so we at the National Fund believe that good jobs really are a design challenge, that we can all we can create good jobs everywhere. There's no industry or occupation that is deemed to be a low quality job, that every job can be a good job. And we have a really broad definition of what that looks like. Most people, when they think about good jobs, they really immediately think about sort of wages, right? What the starting wages and what entry-level wages are. But we know good jobs are about much more than wages. And so I want to spend some time talking about the pillars of what we believe makes a quality job. So first is what we believe to be core, that is just necessary as a basic for a good job. And again, this is the stuff that most people think about when they are identifying what makes a good job. Those are things like compensation, sustainable pay and benefits, the work environment. Are there stable hours and scheduling, which is a very big deal for folks and something we still struggle with. Safety, which is sort of reemerged as a fundamental core piece of what a good job is. Is there a sense of job security? Is there fairness and respect on the job? Is there open communication? Are there basic policies about anti-discrimination or profiling? And is there a transparent grievance process? But then there are other aspects of a quality job that are just as important. The second, which is support. We think about training to get somebody a job, but do we think about training once somebody gets a job? How do we continue that training, including, and very importantly, the immediate training that people get when they first start a job? Are they given cross-training so they can understand how an organization works? Then there's internal assistance. What are things that employers can do that really have a direct impact and support their workers? Things like financial counseling, cash assistance. We saw in COVID just how fragile people's economic lives were. It was a real eye-opener for employers to see just how on edge some of their employees lived in terms of how this disruption caused problems for them financially. So are there HR policies that help folks with those immediate concerns? Do you as an employer think about tax credits around childcare, transportation, housing support, things that you can help employers access? Then just opportunity in this job. In terms of career development, is there specialized training? Are there educational benefits? We think of educational benefits oftentimes at being on the high end of a firm. Are there educational benefits across the organization at every level? Is there mentoring? Is there coaching? Are there ways that people can identify other people at the workplace that they aspire to be? Are there ways that you can create peer and coaching relationships? Acknowledgement. So we do a fair amount of work with employers to help them understand, individual work with employers to help them understand how they can change their jobs. And we use a process around human-centered design. And one thing that comes up every single time in every single instance, regardless of what kind of job it is and what kind of industry that it's at, that internal and external recognition is critical. People want to feel like their work matters. And these are really often no cost, easy ways to acknowledge the work of the people who work there. Are there ways that the perks are, when you look at workplace perks, are they even? Are they offered to folks across the board? Things like bonuses, individual bonuses, team bonuses, or other incentives. And then finally, and this is really important, is just voice. Are you listening to what's happening with workers? Do employees feel empowered? Do they feel engaged? Do they feel like they have agency? And having an internal mechanism in an organization to measure engagement, because it turns out that meaningfulness, and mattering really matter to people. Are there continuous improvement processes? And are there ways that that people can participate in terms of participatory management or autonomous teams or other formal representations within the workplace? So I give this to you because it gives you a much broader span of what a good job can look like and what employers need to be thinking about when they're thinking about this crisis of recruiting and retaining their employees. Next slide. I think what's really important for folks to understand, and when we talk to employers, is that all of what I just described, these job characteristics, they actually match directly to the outcomes that employers care about, right? And so when we think about, and we've done surveys with employers, the key things that are of meaning and importance to them, we get the same answers. Things like turnover, and commitment to the organization, individual performance, engagement at work, burnout. And as you can see, these job characteristics on the right really match to those employer outcomes. If you think about those job characteristics, if you improve those job characteristics, those employer outcomes also improve. And I'm just going to walk through one example of this. Turnover. So this is in this very moment, I am sure anybody in this room who has worked with employers they're hearing about turnover, right? Again, this is the mass resignation. People are leaving their jobs. So if you're an employer and you're thinking about turnover, all of a sudden you have to think about what this feels like for your workers. So if you look at the elements of the job experience, for folks, often turnover is really created by stressors, right? Role stressors about what their role is at their job, and thinking about what kind of supports they get from the organization or their coworkers to be able to do the job that they do. They're often looking, if they're evaluating the job they have versus the job that they can have, they're often looking at their wages and looking at their benefits and seeing if it's competitive with something else that's out there, because we know lots of employers are trying to attract folks out of the jobs they currently have into their jobs. They're looking at the terms of their employment. What are their opportunities for training and development? Do they feel like their job is secure? Are there opportunities for advancement? And they're thinking about the way they're treated by their supervisor and the way they're treated by the organization, and thinking about the supports they get there. So again, as you're thinking, as you're working with employers who are thinking about this, helping them understand and make that connection between what they're concerned about and how it feels for their employees is critical to helping them design a better job. And then finally, we just truly believe that good jobs are key to making a real thriving community, right? With good jobs, good economy boosting jobs, it has all these ripple effects. We get an engaged workforce, a competitive advantage, and we get thriving communities. And so I hope this feeds your conversation and your discussion today. I'm sad that I can't be in the room with you to hear about the sort of the response and how this feels within your community in the moment, and what you're seeing. But I thank you for allowing me to be with you today. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Amanda. If you can hear us, I wasn't sure whether she could or not. So, Laura, if you could go to the next slides. Welcome. I'm John Cleveland. I'm the president of the Innovation Network for Communities. I'm Bill's partner in facilitating TalNet. As many of you know, my wife Michelle and I lived here for many years, and our work on this innovation goes way back to the 2004 Wired grant that kicked off some of this work. So it's just really a pleasure to be here and to be back. This is the first physical meeting I have been in 18 months. So it's really it's really interesting to see how important personal contact is for networking and how fast you can get things done when you can actually see people in a room. So I think that's why we push the boundary on this as an in-person meeting. I think for that, because it has those kinds of side effects. I do want to remind you that you have material on your table, which is the summary of the TalNet innovations, so that you have access to that. But I have if you could go to the next slide, Laura. I wanted to just talk a little bit about the alignment between what we're doing here and what the National Fund laid out in terms of their strategy, both in terms of their solutions and their core values. And one of the reasons we had Amanda speak specifically on the good jobs piece is because a lot of the other elements of what they're doing, we are doing here. The good job strategy is not something we've focused on, so we really wanted to hear about it, get some benchmarking on it, and also see if there was potentially an opportunity to work on that. So they have a set of solutions and a set of 5 core values. So if you go to the next slide, we are really fully aligned with this set of core values. So there's the power of network. We designed this as a network and not as an organization. Racial equity and inclusion. There's a specific TalNet Innovation, Include All, that's been hosted in Talent 2025 that you'll be hearing from Whitney about. There's specifically focused on that. Collaboration and partnership, that's sort of the essence of how the network works. Systems thinking and changing these systems, as Bill indicated. Our aspiration is to have this common set of practices applied at a very deep penetration rate across the region, so it becomes a standard practice, and obviously continuous learning. We're very focused on data and evidence. If you go to the next slide, Laura. And then if you look at the alignment around their actual strategies, Equip Workers for Success, that's what CareerPoint does, and what SkillSense does. Change systems. Higher Reach is designed to change employer systems. And by the way, very nicely aligned with the one slide that Amanda had up of what kinds of employers they're looking to focus the good jobs work on. Values that they translate into specific practices and using data to do actual analysis, which is really core to the whole Higher Reach approach. Job sync on job analysis, and Include All in terms of deepened DEI work. We are a collaborative funding operation with foundations, public workforce, community college, community-based organizations. So we're working on that. And we'll be working over the next year actually to formalize a coalition of funders here so that we can actually apply to the National Fund to be one of their sites so that Michigan will end up being up on their map at some point. And as we noted, there's an opportunity around a focus on good jobs. So if you could go to the next slide. We've got a great panel here of folks who are well known to you. Kevin Stotts, who's President of TalNet 2025. Angie Barksdale, who's the COO with West Michigan Works. Andy Johnston, who's Vice President of Government Affairs for the Chamber. And Dr. Bill Pink, the President of Grand Rapids Community College. All four of these organizations have been really, really focused as leaders on the TalNet innovations, and you'll be hearing from their staff in the following panel. So they've been kind of really in the middle of this work, and we wanted to use this panel for two purposes. One, want to get some feedback and reaction from them in terms of Amanda's presentation and what kind of best practices are happening here in West Michigan around good jobs, and are there elements of that we can build on and enable through these networks that we've been putting together. And then second, I want to do a little bit more of a deep dive on two of the TalNet innovations on CareerPoint, which is really focused in on lifelong career navigation. And the second is skill-based hiring, which is really what Hire Reach is focused on, and get a sense from these folks as, how real are these practices? How are practices changing? And what would it take to think about scaling these? We have, Marlene, is it 38 or 34 employers? 34 employers that have gone through the Hire Reach process. How do we get to 340? And how do we get to 3,400? That's the kind of thinking we want to get. So I wanted to get some feedback from the panel. And I'm going to start with Amanda's presentation. And I want to highlight, I'm going to ask Kevin, I ask you to kick this off because you guys have actually done some pretty interesting work on this. You have on your table a very timely report from TalNet 2025, which is about how employers are reacting to this totally different kind of labor market, and if you'll flip to the back, there's this nice little chart that has 5 kinds of actions that employers can take. So Kevin, can you talk a little bit about where this came from and what you see happening in the market in terms of good jobs that Amanda was talking about?
Yeah, thank you, John. So we had just completed our 5-year, creating a new 5-year plan for the organization. And part of that work, sort of the next step was looking at sort of the workforce system, what's happening in the labor market, and looking at sort of micro and macro trends. And so this is a summary I was saying to Andy before the panel. There's probably a tenth of the data and research that Alex Andrews and sort of our committee put together as far as looking at sort of the current state of the labor force, the job market, and what's happening, and really kind of taking into account sort of this high demand for jobs, the jobs that are going unfilled. At the same time, sort of this chasm where you have people with lower skills, unable sort of at the present time to make that transition. So what we did is really kind of put together these 5 strategies as sort of a structure for employers to start looking at these as a way to look at, how do I as an employer respond to sort of these macro and micro trends. And the sort of the packet of materials, sort of the data kind of talks about the high demand of jobs. You've got some demographic forces that are sort of working against employers in the near term and in the long term. You've got people with lower skill, lower education that need to sort of be supported to make this transition. And what's the employer's response to that? Because we believe that the education and training organizations across the region can only do so much. But if employers are not doing their part, it really kind of falls apart. And so how do we induce more employers to do this work? And I really appreciate the work of Amanda, because what was kind of in our work sort of aligns squarely with what she presented on. And in particular, kind of making these sort of focused efforts on helping people sort of transition. So career navigating, helping them kind of see how can I sort of career ladder or career scaffold into new occupations with education and training. But a big part of that is the role of employers to put more time and effort in investing in the workforce. We hear from our surveys of employers that so many people are not taking advantage of the education and training programs that are offered. Well, they're asking many people to do that sort of out of context of what are their other family and personal responsibilities? And so part of sort of the detail in our plan is to say, you know what, you have to make those education training and opportunities available sort of on that person's sort of work schedule or part of their hourly shift, or compensate them for their time instead of asking them to do that on their own. And I think that's especially true for those individuals and sort of trying to move into sort of more middle skill and upper skill occupations that need more education and training. So, really kind of a big fan of what Amanda talked about, because it aligns up with what we're really encouraging employers to sort of refocus their efforts on in order to sort of navigate these, a lot of these macro challenges, and they're not going to be going away. So it's sort of a permanent state of sort of labor force and the workforce and what employers need to do.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. Bill, I want to ask sort of a similar question to you and kind of emphasize the permanence part of this, because many of you may have seen the demographic drought report that EMSI put out, and their point was this shrinkage in the labor market is something that was happening demographically before the pandemic. The pandemic exacerbated it, but it's going to continue. So it's not like we're going to get back to where we were before just by demographics. So that seems to really change the calculation about how the labor market is structured, which would seem to have real implications for what an organization like yours does, Bill, that works with both the job seekers and employers in such a close way. What's your perspective on how that's happening and how that's likely to change the nature of jobs in our region?
Thank you, John. Good morning. You threw a nice one at me. And good morning to everyone. And the report that John refers to, and I encourage you to look at it, out of EMSI, they label it the Sandsdemic. And what it talks about is exactly what John is saying, that we are really headed for and really actually in the midst of a problem that it's not just the fact that we don't have the workforce out there. Their report would challenge to say that the numbers continue from just a demographic standpoint. How many people? It's a math problem. Mm-hmm. If there are enough people out there. So the report mentions things like reduction in birth rates, the lower number of what we see coming down the pike in the next 5 to 10, 12 years of numbers of students, from that start first grade that go all the way through their education career and then able to work. It's saying that all these numbers are at a place that are hitting all-time lows. So what do you do about it? And so the idea of what John's asking about permanence and how do we get at this? Just a few weeks ago, I was at a conference that was made up mostly of community college leaders. And we had this conversation. I was talking to one of a good colleague of mine who is a president out west. And I said, what are you thinking about all this? How are you guys preparing? What are you thinking about from a standpoint of the college itself and how we continue to do our business? And he had an interesting answer. And when I thought about his answer, it really also is very indicative of Michigan. Because here's what he said. He said, Bill, I'm really not worried about that as far as the college is concerned, because he said, if we look at our data, where he was, he said, what we see is that the number of students who graduate high school versus the number of students who enter college anywhere, not just at his school, anywhere. He said, we're right below 50%. So I challenge you now, because we did the same thing. We do it all the time at the college. We look at what is that college going rate in Kent County, in Ottawa County, in the spaces that we exist. And what you will find, especially here in the last several years, is that our high school to college going rate isn't all that much better. What it tells us is that, and what the question that it begs is that, so if they, for us especially, if they aren't coming to us, if they aren't going to Grand Valley, if they're not going to the university of whoever, where are they going? And what are they doing? And so to get at that question, then also gets at the question that you asked, John, about how do we get at this idea of really bolstering a workforce issue that, friends, is just changing dramatically. And that was, I would have told you that, and I was saying, we're all saying that prior to 2020. what 2020 has done is not only, as people have said, is not only sped up some things, I would challenge to you is this actually really changed some things, not just sped up.
Yeah.
So then what we have to get at now, and I think the way you do it, and one thing I loved about the many things that Amanda said, one of those things I loved about what she said is that she talked about the concept she was talking about is pretty much what we see here in West Michigan. The idea of how do we work together? How do we partner? She talked about pooling resources and pooling our alignment to make sure that our funding and our offerings and our efforts are really channeled in the same way. What happens there, friends, is that if we, with what Amanda was saying, it is really, really, you got to bookmark that one. Because if we're not able to truly think about what does collaborative efforts, TalNet being one, you think about all the entities that come to the table around TalNet, you think about all the entities that come to the table around some of our initiatives here in West Michigan that bring in education, business, philanthropy, all these different folks, community-based organizations that have to come to the table to get at and solve these problems. Put in there also our faith-based organizations, because in some cases, I will say in many cases, those faith-based organizations are churches. They know who some of those people are that aren't in college or are they in the workforce. They know in many cases a lot of those folks. So how do we work together to get at that? And that is going to be, I believe, our question going forward here in West Michigan, is how do we work in accordance with each other to get at the very thing that EMSI is talking about. If you have a shrinking number, if the number is getting lower, and we know the need is continuing to get larger, how do we work together to find those people, to give them pathways? I actually like to use the word highways into good paying jobs. That, I think, is the big question there and the big thing we have to get at, John.
Great. Thank you, Bill. It's always clear what passion you bring to your work, which is really great. So, Angie, I saw your head bobbing. Your head nodding a lot. And in particular, it'd be interesting to get your perspective on, it seems like to deal with this demographic drought, we actually have to increase participation in the labor force. We have to get people into the labor force who are, as Bill said, just dropping out and not going someplace. That's a lot of the work of your organization. Could you talk a little bit about that and how you see this kind of demographic situation changing that?
And not only is it a demographic situation, but I think one thing we need to think about, and we're having a lot of conversations in our organization about, it's reimagining work, right? It's not just getting people back to work, getting people to work. It's reimagining work. And I think that's really what we have to grapple with post-pandemic, is people are reevaluating the priorities they put in their life. What kind of work do they want to do? It's not like the days where mandatory overtime was a given, and they counted on that for their paycheck, and their lifestyle was dedicated around that. So it's not only employers reimagining work, but it's job seekers and individual families are reimagining work. And we as a system need to reimagine how we're providing services to them, right? It's not just getting people into that training. Back in the day when we had a recession, we would have all these training dollars. People would come in, we'd get them into the next training program, and they would be on to their next career path. Like we knew how to do that. We as a system knew how to do that. That's not what we need now in our world, right? That's a path, that's an opportunity for some individuals, but some individuals are coming to us highly skilled, highly degreed, and saying, you know what, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to do something different. So we need to think more strategically and systematically. To Bill's comment about highways, what path or highway do they get on, right? It's not the same standard ones we've always used. So, we're doing a lot of work around that with our career coaching and our career development with our staff. How do we help people navigate that? We're working a lot with our employers that we work with in our business solutions. How are they reimagining how they do their work? It needs to be a mutually beneficial agreement, right? And I think that's what many people over this pandemic are coming out of, saying, you know what, I need to feel better about myself. I've spent a lot of family time. I really liked that. I don't like the fast pace of getting up and working, 50, 60 hours a week. So where do we find that happy balance, right? There's going to be multiple layers and multiple highways that we're going to have to work together to get people to that self-sustaining job. But we're also going to have to rethink about that value, right? Working really hard. We as a culture put so much effort and energy on that. We have to be okay with some people saying, you know what, I can live and be fine working part-time and having another significant other doing the same thing, and we're fine. We can make it work, right? So we need to think that that's okay, but there's also people who need that and want to work the long hours, and that gives them value. So it's thinking more holistically about the economy and work in general.
I think your concept of reimagining work, if I look at Kevin's pie chart here and look at Amanda's slides, which, by the way, we will send to all of you, since the text was pretty small, it's kind of hard to read them. We'll get those to you. It really is a reimagining of work. And I want to turn to you a little bit, because the Chamber has been really active on the policy front in Lansing on some issues that seem really directly related to this, like the availability of quality childcare. Can you talk a little bit about sort of the Chamber's sort of approach and where can policy support the good jobs?
Yeah, I can talk about that, but I don't want to, I'll be honest with you. I want to talk about what we were discussing here, just to what we're seeing with employers. And I want to propose, I like the term the Great Reshuffle better than the Great Resignation or the Great Reassessment. I think Great Reshuffle is just a little bit more positive, but that's what we see happening. And I want to pick up on what you were talking about with, there were so many things we took for granted with what work was like. Going through the pandemic, my highlight was putting my kids on the bus, right? Like, that was awesome, right? And I make time for that now. And at the Chamber, we have the flexibility. Just get your work done. I don't care where you do it, at home, wherever it's going to be. And the employers who are winning and being competitive right now, these issues are all on their leadership team agenda right now. They're talking about flexibility. You talk about the highway that we need to create. Employers need to do a better job internally creating the highway of, you start here, this is where you can go. So many employers have not done a good job of communicating that. I talked to an employer last night. I said, hey, supply chain issues, you're probably struggling with talent, right? I hear it all the time. He's like, no, we saw it coming, so we invested, we hoarded some of our material, like we're doing really well. And I was like, well, what about talent? Nobody wants to leave us. Like, why? Is it competitive wages? He's like, yeah, it's competitive wages, but we're incredibly transparent about where the company is going and where you can go in this company. And so I also want to just, companies who do a good job of this during the pandemic also have strong operational systems like EOS. I'm a big fan of EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. It makes core values come alive. You see them lived out. You analyze your employees based upon those core values. It sets really strong rocks and expectations and accountability. And that's what Amanda was saying that employees want to gravitate to. And I think that that's happening. The other thing on this good jobs conversation, I just want to point out really quick that's kind of left out here is I was thinking back to what I was doing in October of 2020. Like, it feels like 10 lifetimes ago. But last year, I was grading applications for businesses who need some money just to keep surviving. And we talk about families and employees living on the edge. You talk about small businesses living on the edge. You look at some people's tax returns, holy cow, it's like going through their drawers. It's like, I can't believe you're making it, But we need to do a better job supporting those employers. And when we talk about good jobs and creating wealth, also those minority businesses to come alongside them, that's going to create a lot of that economic, inclusive mobility that we want to see. From a policy perspective, I don't know if you've heard, we got $11 billion. What's going to be the best way to spend it? We've come up with that laundry list. We've got some more money for Going Pro. Jacob's telling me we got more demand in West Michigan for those Going Pro dollars than any other place in the state, which can't wait to tell the Detroit Chamber that again. Yeah. So we have a lot of money we're putting at the problem. And one idea we're talking about, John, right, is how do you take a great concept like TalNet and get that out across? Could we use dollars to take these best practices across the state? So there's a lot of ways from a policy perspective to tackle this. And I would say policymakers are all ears if we have good ideas. And I think with the power of this group coming together, we really could do a lot. $1.4 billion in childcare, we've seen that. The childcare stabilization grants are going to come through. It's still going to be slow. But from an employer perspective, as I've been thinking about the child care issue, and we talk about 203,000 women have left the workforce, which again, that's not a bad choice, right? But it's impacting the economy. What can employers do to help women or men who decided to stay home and raise young kids? Mm-hmm. How do we do a better job of welcoming them back into the workforce? I live with one who's trying to do it right now. It's not easy. Mm-hmm. It's not easy to get back in if you have that gap. So there's a lot of ways we can tackle this. I think it's challenging yet exciting. And I would say on the Sansdemic thing, I have 3 kids. This is why I have the things under I've done my part. We talk about fertility rates. I think we could do a little bit more on the baby end too, right? Mm-hmm. That's a whole different policy discussion. I don't know if we want to get into that. So
I just want to note that that's not on the how do you want to participate in TalNet options.
See that here.
It's not one of the innovations, no.
That's your own private.
Andy, thank you for your contribution.
Thank you. So. I want to actually pivot a little bit to a specific TalNet Innovation career point, which is really about making good career navigation, good career coaching ubiquitous. And it seems to fit into the need for pathways. There was an article, I think it was in the New York Times, that said that career pathways are the new fringe benefit. And that's what will keep people in an organization is knowing what the developmental steps are. So, Angie, I think I'll start with you since you guys are the host for the Career Point. What do you envision that we would need to do to get this scaled so that it shows up in our K-12 system, it shows up in all our community college guidance materials, employers are putting career development centers in place. What's your sense of what would be needed to help that scale? What are some of the barriers and how can we move on that?
Mm-hmm. So I think, first off, I think some of this in this innovation is stuff that we all know about and we've all been doing, especially those who work in this space. But, I'm an operations person, right? I'm the chief operating officer. So to me, though, it takes what we know in terms of theory and knowledge and puts it into a system and makes it structured, right? That can be translated from one person to the next, from one organization to the next. So in my vision, to scale something like this, we also have to think of both users, the user of the job seeker or the individual who's going through this system and the organization that's using it. We can't think things as cookie cutters and we drop and play and how we're using it is how you have to use it and how you have to use it. Because when the day is done, the community college has different outcome measures sometimes than what we do as a workforce board. So we need to be able to adapt these systems a little bit so that there's uniformity in the core, but flexibility for systems and organizations and different communities to use that. And that's more evident for us as an organization. We cover 7 counties in West Michigan, and I can tell you it is a core value of us as an organization. We have some underlying themes in everything we do, but services are different in Muskegon than they are in Ottawa, than they are in Kent, right? There's different resources, there's different community needs, there's different issues involved. So whenever we think of something and scaling it and bringing it to larger masses, we need to also think about how do we keep the core but be flexible enough to let people adapt it to where they need to be, because then you have success on both ends. Everybody gets a little bit of what they need from it, and I think that's what we need to think about when we bring things to other locations or bigger places.
Mm-hmm. Great. And Kevin, I wanted to ask you sort of from the employer point of view, do you see employers investing in this new quote-unquote fringe benefit of career development? And if so, what does it look like? And are there barriers to them in implementing that as a standard practice?
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason why is that the better to keep the talent that you have and show them a pathway to go, how do we go from here to here to here, over time and how the employer is going to support that. Otherwise, the threat is that person's going to leave for another opportunity with another organization, and with the sort of shortage in the labor force, it advantages the employer so much to do that. So we see that happening a ton now, which is different than it existed, say, I think 5 or 6 years ago. Even on issues like adult basic education, employers offering adult basic education programs at the workplace, paying employees to do that. I was shocked when I asked this about 18 months ago, just on my board, how many of those employers of all types from all different industries were actually doing that. You would think there would be sort of the middle skill and upper skill occupations they'd be supporting, but they were like, these people are showing up, they have value, they have opportunities before them, how do I help and support them to do that? So I think absolutely. And I think also too, is talking about the navigation and the career pathways. I think one of the things we're also seeing come out in a lot of research now in terms of the low labor force participation rate is we talk about the cliff effect of losing benefits. There's also sort of a second cliff effect in terms of payroll taxes for those low skill occupations and those people in those jobs. The marginal tax rate for some of those individuals, depending upon where they stand in sort of relationship to level of poverty, can be 50 to 60% of their income is paid back out in payroll taxes. So helping individuals navigate that chasm is really sort of something that employers need to be doing, because they're going to have people say, well, I'd like to do that, but I'm not motivated because I have to go through all these other hurdles and sort of impacting my own family's sort of home economics. So I think absolutely.
And Andy, this would seem to be a complicated problem for really small employers that are your members. They're not going to have a lot of them, they're not going to have a career development center. What's the best way to get career navigation like support and skills to the employees in small businesses?
I think with those small businesses is transparency. We're seeing turnover at the chamber because we expose a lot of our great talent to other members. I just lost a young accountant, right, or a finance. And I said, well, why'd you leave? He's like, well, they were pretty direct of, this will be my path within the firm, and this is where I will be in 5 years. And I love the chamber, and I love, it's the funnest place I've ever worked and most meaningful, but this is a great opportunity. So I think for those small firms, again, not taking it for granted, maybe a little bit more transparent on what wages will be. There's been a lot of employers that have withheld that information of who gets paid what for a variety of reasons. I think the workforce is going to be demanding some more transparency on all fronts. I've heard from some employers that they said, oh, we're bringing everybody back in the office. And the employees voted with their feet. They did not come, right? What are you going to do about it kind of thing. So I do think it will be that transparency. And I do think it will be great for small employers to plug into resources like this so that they can compare notes, whether it is on wages and benefits so that they can be competitive, but also what it looks like to develop that plan internally and have it documented and communicated to all their employees.
Great. Thanks, Andy. And Bill, I'm going to end with you on this topic. This has real consequences for your business model, right? Not having good career navigation can lead people to take a lot of classes they shouldn't take. I think about myself, I was getting a degree in city planning, and it wasn't until between my junior and senior year that I actually went and did an internship in the city planning department and figured out that that's the last thing in the world I wanted to do. So how do you see increased importance in your world in terms of providing students with really good career navigation services?
Yeah, and John, I apologize for my last response. I'll try to be calmer in this one.
No. I was complimenting you.
It's okay. No, I did take my blood pressure medicine this morning. And you're exactly right, John. For higher ed institutions, and I see my good friend David Eisler from Ferris State. We sit here on Grand Valley State's campus. For higher ed institutions, it is vital that we are doing good work as far as helping expose our students to what those possibilities are. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, we can't do that well without you. I can tell them all day long about the great job on the other end, but unless there's the employer there as a partner with us saying, yep, and we'll hire you, hard message because you've got to be the ones partnered with us helping in that. And the word I used earlier is so important, that word exposure. And exposure has to happen at the earliest point. That's why I love the career point navigation piece, that those type of things have to start when a student is in their K-12 experience, elementary, middle school, high school. And here's why. I was reminded of this last night. I attended the Boy Scouts had their leadership gala last night. Awesome event. As I sat there listening to and taking in all the things in speakers that who were in our community that talked about their Boy Scout experience and their Eagle Scout experience, what I was taken back to myself is that I thought, Bill, because I had a few people say, Dr. Pink, were you a Boy Scout? And I said, no, I wasn't. Our son was, but I asked myself the question, why wasn't I? I really can't remember many Boy Scouts at all in my elementary school or middle school experience. I remember a few Cub Scouts. I remember a few, you remember brownies, young ladies who, okay, you guys who are too young, never mind. But I remember that growing up. But what I don't remember is anyone saying to me, Bill, let me show you, let me, in this word, expose. Let me show you what Boy Scout and scouting is all about. Let me show you what the benefit, let me show you the opportunities. I grew up in a household with being the youngest of 5, all 7 of us, my 4 siblings, my mom and dad, we lived in the same house. We lived in my grandmother's 2-bedroom house. You do the math on that one. We never had this idea of scouting. What do you mean? I look at it now and I think, my goodness, man, Bill, you missed out on an awesome opportunity. But why? Why'd you miss out on that, Bill? Don't blame anyone. My finger's not pointing at anyone. The idea is if we're not exposing young men and women to the possibilities, they will never know what is possible. And if you aren't with us on these type of things, they will never, even when they come to our place. You hear about that story about first year or first generation college students. Friends, that's a real thing. I would say many of you may be first generation college students. What does that mean? It means that those students on our campus who are first generation, and there are many, there's no one in their household who has exposed them to higher education because they're the first one to go to college. So no one is there to explain to them about financial aid. No one's there to explain to them, you know what, there is a tutoring center that they have. I'm sure they have one on campus. I'm sure they have these things on campus. No one's there to explain it to them. So as a college, we try our best to get to there and get those messages out there. But exposure truly matters. And so if we aren't able, from a career perspective, from an education perspective, the reason I call it a highway is because the students that I see at my college, our students get on and off that ramp. They get on that highway, at education highway, they got to get off for a little while because there's some job stuff they got to work, they got to take care of family. They get back on the highway to start finishing that bachelor's degree now that they finished it. Then they got to get off again. And that highway runs true for them as far as what their education and professional experience looks like. I got to make sure that highway is as smooth as possible so that the on-ramps and off-ramps are smooth so that as they get off and go to and have to go to the world of work more so than they come to school, I need to make sure that on-ramp is going to be smooth for them to get back on and try to keep them on as long as possible. And so the idea of exposure is vital so that people know what their possibilities are, because if they never know those things, they will never be in your doors and they will never know what a good paying job is. Last thing I'll say, I'm taking way too long. Last thing I'll say, one report that was done years ago, ask urban school children, urban settings. They asked these children, what do you want to be when you grow up? A majority of those students said, I want to be a cashier. Why do you want to be a cashier? Tell me why is that so? What they found out is those kids said in my neighborhood, and many of them, exposure, never left their neighborhood. The 7-Eleven down the street, that person behind the cashier's counter had a uniform on and was handling money. So that's got to be a good job. So to them, that was their extent of exposure. You and I look at that and say, oh my goodness, what? But friends, if we're not exposing those students who aren't in those spaces, if we're not able to do that, through ideas like CareerPoint and others, then we're going to find more of what we've always gotten.
Great. Thank you, Bill. I never want to be the person who was accused of trying to repress Bill Pink's enthusiasm. It wouldn't work anyway. So I do want to pivot a little bit in our last couple of minutes to this question of skill-based hiring and thinking about how we get to scale on skill-based hiring. I was struck, Kevin, with your little part of your pie chart that refers to hiring for attitude, trained for skills. Which is about removing artificial barriers to getting into the labor force. That's really what Higher Reach is designed to do. It's what we call evidence-based selection. We have 34 employers implementing it. We need to get to 340 and then 3.4 thousand. I'm just going to open it up to the panel as a whole instead of going through. Given your experience with employers in this space, there does seem to be a real movement around skill-based hiring. Do you think it's real? And what is it that we should be thinking about doing here in our region to accelerate that trend? I'll just open it up to anybody who wants to respond.
Yeah, I'll start. I think it's here to stay. I think it's out of necessity. I think previously employers, when sort of there was equilibrium in the sort of labor market, employers hired or looked for or asked for maybe a college degree as a proxy for soft skills. I know Jason's going to be talking about his work with TalNet. I think so. The employers increasingly are saying, how do I identify the skills that are transferable into other occupations? How do maybe somebody coming into offices of Michigan Works sort of understand what their skills are and how they might translate into other industries, I think is a really important point. I think that's especially true because kind of in our 5 strategies is also employers embracing AI and automation as a way to sort of make up for some of the slack and sort of the people that are available in the labor market to work. I think that creates a challenge because a lot of those low-skilled jobs are getting automated. And so how do we help people identify those skills that are transferable into other jobs, other occupations, other industries? And I think everything that's sort of networked in within TalNet are methods to be able to do that. But I do think it's certainly here to stay amongst employers.
Great.
Absolutely.
Other points of view on skill-based hiring?
I would add that I think the first step is helping employers understand what they need in their workforce, right? I know many employers, we're an employer ourselves, to sit back and say, what do I really need in this position? Like, what is the core skills and abilities I'm looking for? Taking a minute and asking your high performers who've maybe been there for 4 or 5 years, what is the skills that you need to do your job because you're successful at it, right? And really taking time. I know the many employers we work with, very few truly know what they're looking for in a good hire, right? And it starts there. Before we can help job seekers understand how to transfer and talk about the skills they have, employers need to know what they're looking for and what they're asking for. So some of the evidence-based selection in Higher Reach and JobSync really takes an employer through a process to hone in on that and take a minute and not use the job description that we've had for the last 20 years because that's what it is, right? Why do we need to update our job descriptions? They're fine. Take a minute, really think about, do we need a bachelor's degree? Do we need 5 years of experience? Ask the people who are doing the job for you right now and doing it well, what are the skills and abilities they think are needed to do the job well, and then really rethink how that hiring process looks like. It's absolutely important, especially in this labor market. It's another barrier to bringing talent into your doors, right? If you don't figure out exactly how to make that good hire and what you're looking for and think differently about who that looks like and who that is, you're putting another barrier into getting more good talent into the front door.
It's another thing we're seeing with the great reshuffle of things we took for granted. We put out this job description and somebody that fits that is just going to come right through the door. And employers who are not tweaking that and doing this, they're getting left behind and they're suffering. In addition, like the Sands Demic report talks about, is the other thing we can't take for granted is policies for when we let people go. You know, the no call, no show, like you're just automatically fired. Like employers are tweaking that, asking why, really working with folks. Another factor that I'm hearing from employers is just the level of burnout and mental health issues that maybe workplace plus what's happening at home plus a global pandemic plus school and kids and childcare, and so really trying to work with employees because like the report says, once you got them, you got to keep them if you can.
And it does seem that there are an increasing number of employers who are eliminating requirements like you need a 4-year degree, when in fact there's no real correlation between the 4-year degree and the job they're doing.
Or the minimum years of experience.
And I think there's a tension there because employers are sort of opening up or sort of dropping as many requirements for different occupations to just get people in the door, but at the same time, they have to be sort of noting what skills are necessary for the occupations. And that's different than a credential. But the more employers do that, the more that's a way for us to improve the signals to education, workforce organizations to better understand what's necessary for people to sort of move into those occupations and have success and then move up. But so it's kind of like a double-edged sword. Employers are opening up any job requirements that they would have had, but at the same time, we need employers to be sort of detailing the skill requirements so we have that data so that education and training programs can be built around what those needs in those occupations.
Yeah, I'm curious, Bill, as to whether there used to be students who would come in and just get the associate's degree and assume that is that generic credential and that would get them in. Is that changing? Are you seeing that show up in your business?
It's a both and. It's those programs on our campus that are built that way. So a dental hygienist, that program, our machining, our welding, our culinary program, which is the best culinary program in the world. You need to know that. But those really resonate for them to know that they can get that and go to work and get a really good paying job, nursing another one. But then also making sure that there's that, what I call an equity pathway as well, in making sure that next step of going to some of our 4-year partners is there and that's there very clear. The only thing I would say to the EBSP, that's something that our college is engaged in. I love the idea of really going evidence-based. I always, when I think about it, and as much of a fan as I am of it, yet I always think about what's the cart and what's the horse here from a perspective of something that Amanda talked about. I think it was under her support column about the environment that they're going into. So we can do all we can to really go evidence-based and get a more diverse workforce coming in the door. But I want to make sure as they come in the door that it is the things that Amanda talked about, that it is welcoming, that they feel like they belong, that there are elements within that organization that are really going to pull them in, that even if they only see a few people that look like them, that they know that there's efforts to build that and that there is a space where those folks that they bring in, that they do feel a sense of belonging. And I think those things got to go one next to another. Love, as far as Talent 2025 is concerned, the survey that you put out, Kevin, on an annual basis, that diversity survey that asks companies, talk to us about what that looks like in your company. I think those are very important so that we don't have a great effort around diversifying our workforce, only inviting folks into environments that they're going, this isn't where I belong.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Bill. And I think, in our strategies, we talk about employer brand. It's not just a slogan. It's, what do your employees say about you when they're sort of out with friends or families or at a cookout? Are they recruiting people on your behalf because you're a place that people want to work? You have competitive wages. You have opportunities for advancement. People are valued, and that's reflected in a lot of different ways, both in terms of compensation and other sort of non-monetary benefits and strategies. And so that's something I think employers are really grappling with. And as Andy said, the companies who are doing those things, they don't have any problem attracting and retaining talent.
I'm sure we could keep this conversation going for a long time, but we do need to quit and take a break. So let's give this great panel, a round of applause.
Our overall well-being, the sense of happiness and satisfaction with life, depends on career well-being. When we're highly engaged, high-performing, and earning good rewards for our work we enjoy, support for our physical health, and the energy to do the things we enjoy. Financial well-being and a sense of security. And social well-being with time and resources to enjoy the company of those we love. Ultimately, this sets the foundation for community well-being. When individuals thrive, so does our community. Unfortunately, career well-being is not achieved by everyone. Many need help navigating the path of their lifelong career journeys, and employers need help connecting to the right candidates. TalNet makes sense of it all. TalNet elevates West Michigan's track record of talent innovation. TalNet is a network of networks including practitioners and organizations who collaborate to enhance and align efforts towards better career and hiring decisions. Our work draws together 5 essential innovations. Higher Reach helps employers adopt fair and objective hiring practices to connect the right people to the right jobs. CareerPoint helps students and adults find their place in the world of work, matching interests and abilities with training, support, and careers. SkillSense supports development of communication, teamwork, responsibility, and other social-emotional skills vital for every stage of life. JobSync identifies and documents occupational competencies and foundational competencies that are related to job performance. Include All helps organizations be more intentional in their efforts to increase diversity and inclusion. TalNet brings it all together and into alignment. TalNet formed in 2019, assembling West Michigan's leading innovators to build on decades of previous work in education and workforce development. With the goal of going from good to great, each innovation is advanced and undergone testing. These are now proven innovations ready to bring to scale and support the work of all practitioners in West Michigan. What will this look like? In this better future, students and job seekers have skills and resources to make smart decisions about their careers and effectively demonstrate their skills to employers. Employers communicate their competency requirements to job seekers, talent suppliers, employees, parents, and students. Educational institutions and workforce agencies align their offerings to help people attain the competencies they need. Employers identify competencies that are measurably related to job performance. They align their systems to source, select, and develop talent based on these competencies. And policy and funding are aligned to support all of these efforts. These goals are within reach because these innovations are ready for adoption. Together, we can help more people in West Michigan reach their full potential and improve our entire community's well-being. Now's the time to join with us. The greater the participation, the greater the impact.
Okay, thanks. So I'd like to introduce the panel, and your panel members are listed on the agenda, and we're going to go in the order that's here. So Whitney White will be covering Include All, Jason Pacetta will be covering SkillSense, Julie Parks, JobSync, Brittany Leonard's CareerPoint, and then Marlene will cover Higher Reach, and actually we have a little Higher Reach video that we're going to sneak in later too. Look, John and I have the privilege of facilitating this network, but we want to be clear. We're not saying we invented this stuff in the last couple of weeks. We're building on innovation work that's been done for more than a decade in West Michigan, right? This idea of good to great is something that, for a long, long time, there's a number of leaders that have contributed in many ways. And actually, our TalNet board is larger than the 5 people that are here, so we represent a lot of people who have made contributions. But we have 5 people because we have a certain amount of time to cover the 5 innovations. So I want to say we have some guiding questions that the panel has prepared, and then I'm going to just give them time so that they have the flexibility without interrupting them with these questions. But for you to know, here's what we're queuing up. One, we asked each panel member to share a success story. So can you share a success story that illustrates the value of the innovation? So you can say, like, what does this thing really do? And then talk about who can benefit. And sometimes the who can benefit is at an organizational level or at the individual level. Who are the stakeholders that get served by this thing? And then third, we asked them to say, what are some of the challenges? Because it all sounds good when you're sitting here, but then actually when you go to do the work, there's always challenges you run into. So I'm going to turn this over to Whitney to tell us about Include All, and then we'll work our way through our list. Go ahead, Whitney.
Thank you, Bill. Include All is an innovation that was really designed to help organizations be more intentional about their diversity and inclusion efforts. So we took the collaborative approach when we designed this guidebook. If you're not familiar with the guidebook, it's titled Diversity and Inclusion, 5 Essential Leadership Competencies of an Effective D&I Practitioner. So Talent 2025 is the organization I work for, and of course we convene business leaders, nonprofits, workforce development, higher education, and other education partners. But then TalNet is also a network of networks, so we wanted to take that same approach. And one of the things that I found successful with this innovation is that I was able to collaborate with other D&I leaders and practitioners here in West Michigan. So in writing the guidebook, of course I did the traditional research, read books, publications, watched videos, trainings and certifications, and those types of things. But I also collaborated with 15 different D&I leaders across West Michigan who all represent different dimensions of diversity. They work for different industry sectors, so there was higher education represented, manufacturing, professional services, healthcare. So a variety of industry sectors, but then also different company sizes, because we wanted to be intentional about creating a resource that would be applicable for all organizations, regardless of company size or industry sector or geographic location. So the collaboration and the engagement was really important to me, and it's also been one of the things that has helped us advance this work. So in addition to contributing in the guidebook contributors did an interview. So like a human-centered design interview where I just talked to them about what do you think are the competencies that make an effective D&I practitioner. So we did that in the beginning, but then also when we were going through the revisions process, the contributors provided feedback on the content, they participated in focus groups, and then they also participated in a series of workshops. So due to COVID, we hosted everything remotely this year. So between March and June of this year, we hosted 5 different workshops online via Zoom where we talked about the 5 competencies in the guidebook. And we had the panelists who were featured contributors from the guidebook, but then also we had about 85 individual people register for each session. So the sessions were well attended. We received positive feedback. We administered a survey afterwards to say, hey, did you find value in this content? Do you think it helped you with your professional development? And 100% of respondents said yes, that they found feedback and that the book was helpful with their professional development. So those are just some of the successes as far as the collaboration piece goes, and then also the level of engagement. So this is a free resource available to all West Michigan employers, but then we also published the book on Amazon just to increase the visibility of the project and the accessibility to other regions as well. So beyond being shared within our member organizations here, like the local GR chamber, higher education and things like that, when I tracked the engagement online with the Amazon presence, the book was purchased in the UK and also Australia. So that's reach obviously way beyond West Michigan, which was our intent. So just to say, the book has been really well received. We received lots of good positive feedback from both D&I practitioners, but then also executive level staff. So those are the stakeholders that we really want to engage in this project, because the book is designed to teach you what you need to know and be able to do to effectively lead D&I within organizations. So 2 target stakeholders, D&I leaders and practitioners, but then also executive leaders within organizations. Bill also asked us to speak about the challenges of our innovations. So I would just use the umbrella term of the how. When we were originally creating the guidebook, we wanted to ensure to create a document that was relevant to various industry sectors, but then also meeting people where they are on their D&I journey. Because we understand that some people have very limited time and resources, some people are very new to the concept, but then some people are further along. They may have been operating in this space for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, across various jobs or different roles. So we wanted to make sure that the tool was useful to meet people where they are. But then the bigger how for organizations as they implement, which could also be a challenge, is how are you going to prioritize diversity, equity, and inclusion in your organizations? How are you going to create shared accountability? How are you going to use inclusive language that invites people to join you on the journey versus becoming defensive or pointing the finger and making them think they did something wrong? How are you going to develop meaningful metrics that track that shared accountability, but then also implementation within your organization? So how are you going to measure impact beyond just counting people, and to make sure that you are, setting out to do what you intended to do and meeting your personal goals and objectives?
Yeah, I'm going to add a little bit, Jason, as I transition. So I wanted to add just a tiny bit. I had a front row seat watching all this happen, and I got to tell you, Whitney brought together 15 amazing D&I leaders that most of them are embedded in organizations and right there responsible to advance D&I. And they pulled this information together, and they gave real feedback on what they made edits. They didn't just say, Whitney, your book is great, and improved it, right? And then I would say from what I got to see, if you know somebody who's got their heart in the right place and they're seriously struggling, how do I do this? Because I never learned how to lead DEI. I led businesses for years mid-career, but I never learned how to do that, right? Nobody trained me. So if you know somebody who's really trying to do it and they want to figure out how do I elevate this and actually make some progress, there's two things. One, get the book. That's a good starting point. But also, Whitney knows everybody you want to know.
Most people.
She knows everybody you want to know. So, there's a network of people that can help, and there's a resource that can help get started. So that's pretty exciting. Jason, tell us about how this reaches into K-12 and more with skills.
Absolutely. But first, Whitney, congrats on all your success. That's awesome. Morning, everyone. So Skills Sense, as you heard, is a social emotional framework that we use not only across K-12, but can be used within post-secondary and in employers, if you'd like. Now, when I think about the success we've had with Skills Sense, my mind immediately goes back to our first work with West Michigan Works and helping them think through their career-ready certificate and training program that they're currently doing. So thinking about that end, but then also my mind goes to recently Denise, who's a third grade teacher on the West Shore of West Michigan, and her team that are working with Skills Sense in her classroom. These skills that we're talking about, responsibility, communication, teamwork, time management, these are the skills that really we think each and every day we emphasize these, we teach these, but we don't necessarily make them explicit. When I think about Denise in her classroom, what Skills Sense really helped to do for her and her team is helped her really reflect on where are we teaching these skills, what do we expect from students, and then how do students really know, am I actually getting better at these skills over time, and what do they look like in an actual real world setting? So it's been great. It's been great to see that team in this third grade setting think through, what do I already do around these skills, and what do I need to supplement or kind of revisit to make it even a more enriching experience within my classroom, within our school, to kind of help students develop these skills over time. So as I've alluded to, Skills Sense, although the main thrust of it really is in K-12, because honestly, we want to see graduates from our high schools across the area having these skills in abundance and knowing where their strengths are, where they still need to work, but also how that fits into a future career and a future occupation. Because as you know, different occupations leverage these skills differently. But these skill sets can also be used within a post-secondary setting or an employment setting to think about and reflect on how are we really making sure that these skills are alive within the programs that we have, and how are we helping our students and our employees develop these skills over time. Now, the problem with that is the fact that these, like I said before, these skills are the things that you implicitly think like, oh, I'm like teaching people about responsibility and time management and communication all the time. We talk about that and we kind of like reinforce it whenever I can. But if it's not explicit, if it's not something that you give feedback on, if it's not something that you really say, I want you to help to grow in that skill, or I want to recognize that you have that talent in that skill, then oftentimes people, it kind of leaves their mind. They don't necessarily even know they have that skill. They don't know that they need to develop it, or they don't know that I need that skill to get that next job. So really making this system really plain and really transparent is really, really good work, but it's tough work because it really takes some reflection and some time as an organization, as a group, to see what are we doing, and as opposed to patting ourselves in the back saying like, yeah, we already do that, saying where can we get better and where can we add on to our current system to make sure that we're making sure all of our students, all of our employees, and all of our job seekers are getting these skills over time. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Julie, who's going to talk to us about JobSync.
Thanks, Jason.
Welcome.
I can't tell you how important Jason's work is, especially when you talk about post-secondary education. Because if you think that we can train someone in all those skills in 6 weeks or in 6 months, if we don't build this foundation and start to tell students what it takes to be successful in these different careers with these life skills, it's very difficult to remediate that at old. It doesn't mean it can't be done, it's just different. And so it's a really important innovation that we appreciate your work on. So JobSync, I am half of JobSync. JobSync really focuses on the people who are doing the job. What is their skill level? What do they need to know to be successful in this job? And my counterpart in this is Amy Lebednick from West Michigan Works. And as we started working together on this project, we realized, hey, what educators do best is teach and educate. And Michigan Works, what they do and their relationship with employers could really be beneficial. And so let's kind of split this up a little bit and figure out, let's each do what we do best. So as you heard in the first panel, employers have trouble finding people. We have programs at colleges, right? We have programs in high school directed to career and technical education programs. Why do we not produce people all the time who are ready to go to work, who are ready to be productive on day one? What are we missing? And while we love you HR professionals, we see a disconnect between you and the operations divisions of your organizations. So how do we bring that together? How do we truly find as educators what we need to include in our programming to make people successful on the job? And that's what the JobSync innovation has done. So I want to give you an example. West Michigan Works facilitates they have a Hot 100 list of jobs in West Michigan. So they started with this idea, we're going to ask our employer partners to send people who are doing these jobs at those organizations to us, the best performers in those jobs, so we can find out what does it really take to do that. And we compare this to something called ONET. It's something that's existed for a very long time. It's on the government. The government's done this with different occupations. What are foundational skills? What are occupational skills? So we have this template to start with so we can start the conversation, our Michigan Works partners, with these individuals doing the job, figuring out, is this really important in this job here? Is this not important? What are those social skills that they need on the job? Do you really not need to work with people if you work in IT or a technical position? So a lot of discovery happened during that. Then Michigan Works puts these reports out. In fact, if you go to talnet.org, you can see it. There's over 62 of them out there now that have been done for West Michigan, for the region. And they're not one company. They're not just company A. They're a group of companies of different sizes that have people who might be industrial maintenance technician. Or if you're Blue Cross Blue Shield and you come to GRCC and you say, we can't find people to be employee benefit agents. We have all of these small companies, 50 or under, that work with us that have these people. They can't fill this position. And they showed us their job description, which required a bachelor's degree and 3 years of experience and all kinds of wonderful things. The job starts at $42,000 a year. So we said, great. Would you mind gathering some of these employers with Michigan Works and with us to go through this job analysis? So we put this information together, they met with us, and lo and behold, you might have read 2 weeks ago about a new program that we've just started in partnership with Blue Cross, with 6 of their employer partners, including BHS and TGG Solutions, to offer the first employee benefit agent apprenticeship program, which all it requires is that you start with a high school diploma and you're interested and ready to work in the insurance industry. You don't have to have a bachelor's degree. Over the next year, we're going to give you training in the theory part. We're going to give you some experiences. You're going to work at that job, and within a year, you're going to take the state licensure exam, and you're going to be employed at $42,000 a year with full benefits and an opportunity to grow in that job. And this is a big first for a company to do a white-collar job where you're not required to have a bachelor's degree. So this was one example of something that we've done together. So what does it mean? Colleges can benefit, K-12 can benefit, because you can tie to these skills exactly in your curriculum. You can make your life easier because you know this is the job family. This is the core skills that you need to be successful there. What's a challenge? how do you incorporate this into your program review process? How do you make sure it ties to the K-12 curriculum that you have to do? And working with a partner like West Michigan Works, you need to learn to give up control. And that's hard for some of us in education to give up. Why? We have advisory committees, and we have some great advisory committees. But what Michigan Works can bring to the table are a wider group of businesses that feel that this is a neutral body. I can talk freely about my educational partner. And while we are great, we are not perfect. And we have to continue to improve. And so this is a mechanism for us to get true data to really sync. This is what employers need. Here's the educational program. How do we meet? And it gives us the forum to teach employers about, you want this level. There are these skills that we need to teach to get someone to this level. Why do they need to have writing? They're never going to write for you. They don't have to do an email. They don't have to do a report. They don't have to record data. So it gives us that opportunity to really have that clear communication with each other. So I want to call out Muskegon Community College and Ferris State University. This is a big lift for a college. This is different than how we normally have to work. So at Muskegon Community College, their manufacturing faculty and team are working with us on the industrial maintenance and what that looks like. At Ferris State, their College of Engineering Technology is looking at what they've done in welding through West Michigan Works and what changes and what results. What does it also do for us? It lets us align those skills to those national credentials. And while some employers say the credential doesn't matter, when I produce an individual with that credential and that credential validates their learning, imagine employers see better employees that come to work for them. And we have to produce people with credentials. That's one of our outcomes. And so the Job Sync really brings together the skills of the workforce system, the education system, to truly meet employer needs and truly look at what does someone need. So I think back to 2008 when we had all these engineers who had lost their jobs. And they came to us and they said, what do we do next? And we had no mechanism to understand what engineering skills, how did those relate to other jobs? Through Job Sync and the skill mapping that we're able to do, we have better answers today. Answers that really tie into this career point work that Brittany does.
Thanks, Julie. It is such an honor to be sitting up here with this group of people, and as I'm listening to what everybody's been doing, I just sit here and think, wow, we have done a lot over the last couple of years, and I hope you're beginning to hear how we're connected, how these different innovations are separate and yet building on each other. I have the privilege of leading the Career Point strategy, and Career Point is really an evidence-based career coaching process, but it's taking all of the steps that we do with a person from the time they walk in a practitioner's door until they are employed and beyond. And it's said here, as Angie was talking about earlier, here's a structure to do that. Here's a way to make sure that we are connecting people to their best work, really to their best life's work, because we're using evidence of their own skills, abilities, interests, personality, and matching them to the jobs that are out there in West Michigan in high demand that we know our employers are hiring for right now. And it's because of the work that Julie and Amy are doing that we know what those skills are, and we know how to match those, and we know what they need. I'm going to talk about, Bill asked us to share a success story, and I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to share two success stories. And I'm going to talk about two individuals who have actually gone through the Career Point process and where they are today and continuing on that. The first was a recent high school graduate who came out of high school and said, I want to be a doctor, but didn't know how to do that, needed to work, and thought that if I need to work, maybe I should work in the healthcare field so I can get some experience there. And so he met with a career coach, and through the assessment and self-discovery process, decided he wanted to start his clinical experience as a certified nursing assistant. So his coach assisted him in finding funding to complete that short training for CNA. He passed that training. He passed his state licensure last March. He got a job as a CNA. And he is continuing on that career pathway at GRCC, working on his general education requirements so he can continue on that healthcare pathway. So that is a high school student just graduating. My second story is also about somebody in the healthcare field, but really different. She's a medical assistant who had 10 years of experience. She liked healthcare, but she was ready to grow and to do something more and to continue on her career path. So on her own, she went to school and she completed her Bachelor of Science degree. But guess what? She got done with it and still didn't know what she wanted to do. She didn't have a clear career pathway in that. And so she worked with a career coach who, again, through the series of self-discovery assessments, personality assessments, interest, skills, really decided that she was a good fit in social work. And so she worked with her employer and took advantage of her employer's tuition reimbursement program and went back to GVSU to get her master's in social work. But along the way, she realized as she was working with her career coach, I don't need to wait till I'm done with my master's program to take that next step on my career path. With the training I already have and the work experience I've already had, I'm ready to take that next step, even though I don't have my master's yet. And so when a position came open at her current employer for a medical caseworker, she applied for that, and she was a great fit and started that job last March. So she's doing that job as she's continuing on her pathway and working on her master's in social work. These are just a couple of examples of how CareerPoint can really work with people who maybe don't know what they want to do, maybe they think they know what they want to do, but they don't know what that pathway looks like, they don't know what that next step is or how to get there. And I wanted to talk about both of those stories because I really wanted to show that as we talk about who can benefit from CareerPoint, when you're talking about the individual level, it's really anyone at any point in their career. You've got a high school student who doesn't know what he wants to do, and a professional who's been doing her job for 10 years and is ready for something different and doesn't know what she wants to do. And the same model works for both of these people, which means when you're looking at what organization can benefit from this, it's really any organization who provides career guidance, career development, workforce development for people. So if you're a school who's working with graduating high schoolers, or if you're an organization like Michigan Works or a community-based organization who's working with somebody who maybe has some experience or someone who wants to make a complete, as we've been talking about this morning and heard from the panel this morning, somebody who wants to make a complete career change, the CareerPoint model can work for that organization. I think it's also important to recognize the fact that I have the benefit at Michigan Works of having somewhere between 40 and 50 career coaches. They are full-time career coaches across our 7-county region. That is what they do for their job day in and day out. But we recognize that there are many organizations who provide career development guidance to people, and they don't have full-time career coaches. That's not their title, that's not what they do, it's only a piece of their larger job. And it's really important that we provide a framework and training and access to those individuals who are really boots on the ground providing really valuable services to people. Because what the CareerPoint framework does is it bases these decisions on evidence of both the person, their skills, abilities, interests, personalities, but also on the evidence of what jobs are out there, what's in high demand, and how do we help make those matches. And so it's almost even more important for a person who does this as a piece of their job to have this kind of access to provide really good evidence-based guidance rather than just on assumptions, guesswork, and trying to guess what's out there and how to help connect people. So I think it's a really great framework in that it can benefit both anybody at whatever stage they are in their career and also so many different types of organizations because it's flexible enough, as Angie was talking about earlier, to do that. I'm really glad we're talking about challenges and innovations. I'm not sure we do that enough. If you've done anything in innovation, you know that it is not all puppy dogs and rainbows and unicorns. It's hard work and it's messy and there are challenges along the way. A couple of the challenges that we see in this work is first, formal processes take discipline. This is a 7-step process and there are pieces of it that you have to know, you have to be good at. And so when you're asking somebody who has done this work for any period of time to change how they do this work, if you work with people, you know change is hard. And so that is certainly a challenge for organizations. It's also a challenge to remember that this is a model. It's not, I always I remember back in our early conversations, Bill, talking about like, these are people, not widgets. They don't fit neatly into 7 linear steps. That's just not how people work. And so it has to be a flexible enough system that you can meet someone where they are and the experience they already have and what they already know about themselves, and take them to where they need to go without forcing everybody to go through every single step of every single piece of the process. That is demotivating to people, both the coach and the individual. And so it has to be flexible, and your coaches have to be well enough trained to know what to skip and what it's okay to miss and what's really important to keep for that person. We talked a little bit about scaling earlier in the first panel. We've been talking about how do we automate this work. There are some people who are always going to need one-on-one career coaching guidance. We're never going to put career coaches out of work, but this system, this process is really valuable for anyone at any point in their career. And there are some people who would really benefit from doing this on their own. They don't need a coach to guide them through. They could take themselves through this self-discovery process, do their own research, and make some of their own decisions. So how do we automate that and make that available on just a much wider scale to reserve our limited resources for those one-on-one coaching sessions for people who really need that? And then finally, as we all know, and as you heard about this morning, job seeker engagement it's just hard. It's really hard right now. But I think that this work is more important than ever, because as I think the panel talked about this morning, and I've been seeing, I think people's relationship to work has changed. And so as they're looking for something different, this is an excellent process to take them through that, to help them figure out what do they really want to do and what is that best life's work for them. So even though that's really hard, it's also a part of the solution to some of that job seeker engagement we're seeing right now. And with that, I will turn it over to Marlene.
All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Marlene Brostrom. I'm the program manager for Higher Reach. I'm going to go in a little bit of a different order for my questions, and I did get approval from Bill, so I'm not going to get the evil eye today. We do have a Higher Reach video that's really going to speak to some of the success stories and the impact that Higher Reach has had on organizations here in West Michigan. So before I go into what the challenges are, just to provide you with some context, you heard from my colleagues earlier talk about, as part of this world of TalNet, it's about making sure people have the resources and the support to navigate what's oftentimes maybe a not easy career path. At the same point, it's really important that employers understand how to select the right talent, right? How to identify those competencies. And that's where Higher Reach comes in. So Higher Reach really works with employers to help them improve the way they select talent so they can connect their role with the right person. If you think about selecting talent, right, it's a decision an organization has to make. And oftentimes, if you think about it even for yourself, if you've applied from one organization to the next, it's different, right? The interview process, the assessments they have you take, there's a lot of variability. And research will show you that anytime one human is assessing another human, there's room for bias, noise, and sometimes all these other variables that come into why you select talent that often isn't related to the job. So what Higher Reach does is we utilize the framework that Julie talked about earlier, this job sync framework, to help employers identify what are the competencies you need for the job, foundationally, like the skill sense work that Jason talked about, what is someone willing and able to do, and then what are those occupational competencies? So we utilize that framework to help employers start to say, what data do I need to collect? What are the tools, actual predictive tools that we can use? And what is a discipline process that we can use, again, to make sure we're getting the right people in the right spot? It's a difficult labor market right now, so employers don't have the luxury back of, I remember working for Michigan Works in 2010. We would do a job fair, and we would have lines of people lined up out the door. It's not the case anymore. So we need to help organizations identify who's maybe most capable to do the job. And then, like as Kevin has in his report here, hire for attitude, train for skills. So that's what Higher Reach is about. And then the video is going to talk a little bit more about what Higher Reach is, the framework that we use. But real quick to talk about the challenges, a stakeholder would face as they're in this work with us. I've mentioned we've worked with over 30 organizations. As you can imagine, hiring is very sensitive to organizations. It impacts everybody. At one point in time, you have, entry level, you're hiring entry level staff, all the way up through the organization, and everyone is impacted by the success or the failure of a hire. This requires significant change management efforts from the organization and leadership support and buy-in. And sometimes we've experienced leaders change. They move change organizations, so that can impact, how fast an organization, implements this new model of hiring. There's also a lot of variability, like I mentioned earlier. Employers hire different. there's a lot of information out there, some accurate, some misinformation about the best way to hire talent. So it's very confusing, I think, for HR professionals, talent acquisition, to make sense of what's the latest and greatest assessment, what's the new way of interviewing, how should I be sourcing. And then I think the other thing that's really important is if you think about talent acquisition right now, and if you have talent acquisition at your organization, give them a hug, give them a high five, tell them that you recognize their work. They're stressed right now. You know, we have the Great Resignation coming on board. They're dealing with COVID. Many HR staff now have to handle and navigate all the, COVID issues that come with it. And then this world of remote work, right? Most employees want to work remote now, so they're trying to navigate all that. So on top of it, asking them to change the way they hire talent and implement this new system can feel overwhelming. However, I'll say most organizations, thankfully, that we've worked with, we've been really lucky to have some phenomenal organizations here in West Michigan, that now is a good time, of any time. So if it's really important right now that we reduce our turnover, improve retention, we have to make sure we're doing our best to hire the right person the first time and get it as right as possible. So again, say thank you to your TA staff, your recruiters. They're working hard right now. And at this point, Laura, I'd like to queue up the HireReach video to hear directly from the employers. So again, we've worked with 34 organizations. Here's a subset of their experience and the impact HireReach has had on them.
Sometimes we don't make the best decisions on who we hire because we're just so eager to get someone in to do the job.
I was in labor relations for a while at the city, and I think sometimes you end up with problems in the workforce and people are just cast in the wrong role.
We're competing for jobs, for candidates with the same people, and we're always looking for a leg up and some way to better our process.
Talent attraction, development, and retention are universal challenges.
A decentralized hiring process was not going to allow us to reach the heights and reach the goals that we wanted for ourselves.
Most organizations have the desire to do the right thing. HireReach helps organizations make better hiring decisions with data and evidence to support talent acquisition as they make those decisions, really with the goal to make it fair, reduce bias, reduce noise, and then ultimately impacting the quality of hire, reducing turnover, and increasing diversity of their workforce.
HireReach brings that research, that knowledge about the right way to hire and promote individuals, to give employers everything they need to implement evidence-based selection and a scientific, data-driven, fair selection process.
We had a lot of tools and a lot of time with them. They took the time to learn what we needed to do at the City of Grand Rapids, and they learned about our hiring process.
It's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all application, and so you can certainly work with their team to figure out a solution that works best for you.
Organizations are different industries, different employee size, different products, different service offerings, and the benefit of HireReach is there's support there so that they can implement evidence-based selection in a way that really works for their organization.
Evidence-based selection brings to us different benefits. It impacts our ability to create equal access to opportunity.
Change for an entire organization, systemic change, transformational change. Those aren't always easy conversations to have.
One of our goals is, in being a triple bottom line organization, is trying to reflect our community. And if this process allows a vast variety of diverse candidates to be employed at Cascade Engineering, that's a win for us as a company.
We have seen more candidates of color in our pools of people who are eligible to move forward in the process than what we had seen before, which is very impactful for our organization.
I rely on data, on science to make decisions. Now I am equipped to mitigate bias in our process.
It's every step in the process that's helping us measure.
I didn't realize the impact of those tools and how they could affect not only the candidates that we are considering bringing in, but how those candidates can progress within their career with us.
HireReach has made my job better as a leader within an organization. I have much greater confidence that the results will meet our goals of greater quality and greater diversity.
And this is a process that helps companies recruit, and not only recruit, but retain individuals with great talent. One of the key benefits of this was really giving us an opportunity to take a deep dive.
Talent acquisition, we are the face of the organization many times. We are the individuals that are helping to bring in individuals that will serve our communities. And this process has really helped position us strategically to do that.
Okay, thanks, Marlene, Higher Reach, and panel. So, panel, I'm gonna bring up Luis in a minute here, so you can be dismissed. Please make sure you turn off your microphone before you go back and chat with somebody. All right, I want to talk about our partnership with, and Luis, I'm going to have to say a couple words about you, so you got to be patient with me. So, working with Doug and Maria DeVos has been, John and I have chatted that like the most amazing experience we've had in our career. And Luis is in charge of community initiatives for Doug and Maria DeVos. And their way of working is they decide some things that they want to work on, and then they invite you to come help them do it, right? It's not like you don't apply for a grant and then they send you money. You really get invited to partner. And the thing I want to say about Luis that we've discovered working together over the last couple of years is he has inspired all of us to do the best work we've ever done in our lives. The guy is brilliant, right? He has this combination of two things that is unfortunately too rare. He's brilliant, and like he never misses something to ask a question about. Okay, so that elevates us. And the other thing he's consistently able to do that I'm so jealous of, he is always really polite, right? He is brilliant. He brings out these brilliant questions, and he is always gentle in the way he does it. So he has inspired us to just do fantastic work. So I'm introducing Luis because unfortunately Doug could not be here today, and Luis is going to talk about that in a minute and give a few comments for the foundation.
Well, thank you for the kind words, Bill. That was if you had told me that, I wouldn't have volunteered for this. So unfortunately, Doug could not be here with us today. He's been feeling a little ill the last couple of days, and out of an abundance of caution, and we know what that means these days, he's just staying home, not having interactions with folks. So I need to pinch hit for him and just say a few remarks. And unfortunately, despite Bill's great billing for me, I don't really compare well with Doug DeVos. He has, for one thing, more hair than I do, though he's catching up with me on that score. Certainly more height than I do. Arguably a lot more charisma than I do. And for sure, a whole lot more money than I do. On the other hand, he's not Cuban, so things balance out. But I do know what Doug was going to say today because I helped with the talking points for him. And the first thing he was going to say was to express how proud he was that the Doug and Maria DeVos Foundation has been able to partner with this TalNet team to do this terrific work over the last 2 or 3 years. It's been impactful work. It's right up Doug's alley. He's about empowering people, unlocking possibilities, and he understands the critical role that career well-being plays. I don't know if he's aware of this Gallup data from which that pyramid was constructed, but he gets that. He understands that as a business person. So he would have commended TalNet and its team leaders for the great work they have done. He also would have praised this team for not being afraid to undertake disruptive innovations. It's a term that Doug often uses. We're good, but we need to get to great, and to do that, we have to disrupt some things. And Doug would have been, showering praise on this effort for not being afraid to undertake new things, trying new approaches, piloting new projects, and scaling those that truly work. He would also, I think, express his appreciation for the fact that TalNet hasn't tried, and here I use a Bill Guest expression, TalNet hasn't tried to boil the ocean. It hasn't tried to do everything that needs to be done. It has focused on some key levers of system transformation in our workforce system and really pounded on those. And even those we wondered, 5 may be too many. But thankfully, they have all panned out. So to go from good to great, we have to do more. And Doug would clearly acknowledge that, but also say that TalNet has provided a terrific foundation for doing the more that needs to be done. Now, I will add a Lugo word here, not DeVos, to say that in all my years of philanthropy, I've been involved in a lot of terrific projects. Some of them, here at the Doug and Maria DeVos Foundation, and some of the leaders of those projects are sitting in this room. But I have to say that in all those years, I've never been involved in an initiative where the return on investment has been so rapid in such a short period of time. You saw that, 2019, to have accomplished all this is truly remarkable. And on a range of projects, as you saw, a range of innovations. So that, for me, professionally, has been extremely gratifying. The reason for that, of course, I was going to say, you see it in front of you, but Bill dismissed them, but it's the leadership, of these various projects. They've just been outright terrific, smart, committed to the work. They have persisted through the work. Grit is one of those social emotional skills, Jason, that I'm sure you're teaching our K through 12 students. They have embodied that for us. And it's been a pleasure for me personally to work with you folks. The organizations behind them, because they're not sort of independent contractors, they're embedded within organizations, and the support those organizations have provided has been also very, very impressive. They've put skin in the game, not only with their time, but in addition to that, and are committed to carrying on these innovations once, by design, the role of the foundation sort of fades away. So that also is very gratifying. And Bill, of course, you and John and the terrific leadership you have provided, those are the elements of success. When people ask me, that's what I point to, because that really is what accounts for that. So no, John, I have to say, remind me to speak to you after the event, because as you know, English is my second language, and I'm always building up my vocabulary. And you use the word ubiquitous, and I want to know what that means because I see it everywhere. Yes, sir. Yeah, I coach him on Hegel, and he expands my vocabulary. That's good. So, if Doug were here, he would conclude by again thanking you for the terrific work you've done with TalNet. And Doug, being the great encourager, he would no doubt encourage you folks to keep up, this strong momentum. And then he'd end up saying something like, onward and upward. I would say, adelante.
Okay. Thank you so much, Luis, for your words and all your encouragement and support in the last couple of years. So look, in closing, I had a couple of remarks, and then this is now your time. And I want to go back to where we started. This is good to great, and this is about us lifting you up and helping you to serve the people that you serve. So what I want to call your attention to is this last item that says engagement options. Excuse me. And the engagement options, I know, you didn't learn enough today to figure out exactly how you would engage with us. I understand this. We didn't want to have a 2-day conference and go through every detail. What we wanted to accomplish today is that you have awareness that this is happening in West Michigan. We want you to feel the invitation to join and benefit from this work. And we wanted you to meet the people who are leading it, right? So now you're aware that some design work has been done, some investments have been made, and if these things can benefit your organization, get connected to the work and take advantage of the work that's been done. So we put together this engagement options so that you have a little bit of a menu. So in the beginning, again, we have awareness, and we're not expecting you to make a commitment to us. We're here to express a commitment to help you. And if you look down the lower corner of this sheet, there's some next steps. What we would ask is take a few minutes while you're still here and you're in this moment and you're thinking about what we're doing, and think through which of these, if any, makes sense for our organization. And if so, who would I have on my team leading this? And then go to our website, and you can use this image to look at that on your phone, and that'll open up so that you can send us a message through the form on our website and say, hey, I'm so-and-so from this organization, and we're really interested in A and B. And send us that note, because then you're empowering us to reach out to you and to invite you to the upcoming activities and to pull you into these innovations. All right, and this is the important step, because there's a couple of points that I want to go back to from the panel. One is Andy's word, the great reshuffle, right? I mean, that's disorienting all of us, right? You're all working hard to figure out how, what's the new normal for our organization. And then Angie brought up this point of adoption, and then throughout there was this adapt and adopt, right? That these are models that you can adapt and adopt. And I want to make a final point of innovation that John and I did a bunch of studies on innovation years back. It was actually the Right Place Manufacturing Council published a big report. And a big learning we had there was you don't get any value by inventing something. All right, so even if we've invented 5 beautiful solutions, it doesn't do any good until it is adopted, right? Benefit comes from people using the invention and scaling the invention, not from inventing it. So we're at this stage where the investments have been made, and now we really want to see people benefit from the work that's been done. If you have questions for our team, just come find us and we will help you. Most of the team's sitting right here. So if you have questions, they're available right now. Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you.